Good afternoon. Welcome to The Plan. This is Brad Roach, the mortgage planner, and you are joined back with The Plan. I have Jacob back in the studio. Good afternoon. How are you?
Good.
We're doing a special one today.
Yeah, we are.
Very
We got
fun.
a special guest in today.
We do. We have Alison with us, and you are with Lodestone Real Estate. Am I saying that properly?
That's correct.
Now, did you name that?
I did not.
Is there meaning behind it? Welcome, by the way. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Is there meaning behind the name?
There is meaning behind it. So lodestone is actually a naturally occurring mineral that was used in original sailors' compasses to identify true north.
See, now you remember a show that I was on, and we had Goosehead Insurance.
Yeah.
You heard of them? I said,
I have.
why did you name it that? You had no idea. So I'm glad you had an answer. You had no
Yes.
idea. And they just picked a goose. I thought that was interesting. Well, welcome to the show. You've been in real estate for how long?
Just started my 8th year.
8 years. So you're dangerous in it, and you were raised in it. We talked a little bit
Yes.
prior to getting on the air. Tell me a little bit about background for you.
Yeah, so I grew up, my dad was 5th generation builder, and him and my mom would flip properties. They did vacation rentals, they did long-term rentals. And so they really encouraged me and my sister to get in with them, get our hands dirty.
Vacation rentals, though, back, how long ago was this?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm about
We
to
won't
be.
age you.
It's okay, I don't mind. I'm very proud of my age. I think birthdays are a gift, not a given.
Thank you.
I like
I'm
that.
about to be 41 in a few weeks. So this is going back 30 plus years.
The
40
reason
years.
I'm asking is I don't think that would have been normal at the time.
It was where I grew up, but it was not as broad scale as it is now. So I grew up, I'm from New Jersey originally, and my parents.
You're too nice to be from New Jersey.
I get that a lot.
You get it a lot. Okay.
I did. I ended up in the South for a reason. No, because I love New Jersey. Great people there. Just, not as warm and fuzzy maybe as
We
the
can always
suburbs.
tell when someone's moving from New Jersey.
Yes.
You handle it now.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
So you got a little bit of that in you,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yes, I am very direct. And when I've got a timeline, you're not slowing me down.
So you're around 5 generations of building and contracting, the hammers out, getting
Yes.
it done. You're seeing rehabs growing up. You're seeing new construction growing up. So that didn't throw you out of the business. It brought you closer to the business.
So it actually threw me out of it to start.
It did. Okay.
By the time I was probably about 10, I was so sick of going to open houses, looking at things. Like, I just wanted nothing to do with it, and I just stopped paying attention. And then as I got a little bit older, I got to the point where in the summers, my dad would allow us to start working on the houses and earn some money. And
Okay,
I've
now it
always,
got appealing.
yeah, now it got appealing. I've always enjoyed that. My parents will tell you I was the kid that saved every penny possible.
Okay.
And so I knew 17 was around the corner and I was going to need a car. So all of a sudden it was very enticing.
Very. I agree.
I enjoyed being outside. My parents were doing these homes off the coast of New Jersey on Long Beach Island. And so beautiful weather and beautiful place to be outside during the summers rather than stuck inside someplace.
Okay.
So I just really, that's what started to draw me back in. And my parents were big proponents on education. My dad never really had any desire for either me or my sister to take on the family business.
I noticed you had a background in education as well.
I do.
Did that come from him as well?
That came from both of my parents, really just pushing that. I was very, very fortunate. Our public school system was not great where I grew up. And so my parents pulled me in 8th grade and my sister in 9th grade and sent us to private school. We had a phenomenal education at the Petty School in Hightstown. And then I had the opportunity to go to Vanderbilt University. And so I think it was a little different than maybe a lot of people, but I knew exactly how much it cost financially. And I never took that for granted. And I made sure to make the most of it. And I'm a strong believer in that. It's how I ended up. I got into fundraising with independent schools for the first 10 years out of college. And I was a big proponent of financial aid because I know what a difference education can make. And even still in real estate, I really enjoy being able to train agents, being able to be a great mentor for agents, whether they're on my team or not. It's one of the reasons why we shifted to eXp Realty to have a little bit bigger of a platform nationally. I know you and I were discussing a little earlier, we'll be moving into the Atlanta area this year. But it gives me a lot of opportunity to go out and help educate people we're big as a team on financial literacy. And we're big on educating our clients. We don't do as many listings as a lot of agents do in this market because we encourage our clients not to sell their homes.
I find that interesting. A lot would want to, obviously that's a natural progression, selling a house and going and purchasing another one. From the stand, what made the shift from education into real estate?
So hilariously, I had a job offer at UVA to go down and be director of development there. And my husband and I both loved Charlottesville. But at that point in time, we'd been married maybe 6 months, and I didn't want to go back to being on the road 24/7. And so it really caused me to take a look at where was I headed, because I was already at the top position in the high school world. And so the only place I could go was college, or I was going to stay in the same role for 40 years. And when you get to know me, you'll know that's never something I'm capable of doing. And so I decided, one of my parents at the time, he had made the switch from commercial to residential real estate about 15 years earlier. And we were up in Greenwich, Connecticut. And so I reached out to him and said, can I go shadow you for a day? I have a lot of questions. I had started to notice realtors who were younger. I love the realtors my parents used, but when I was really little, I remember going into the offices, because back then you literally had to go and physically pick up the keys.
Right.
And looking around, and everyone was 9,000 years old. And so it did not occur to me that this was something you could do, right? I just assumed, all of them were
How old were you
retired.
at the time?
I mean, I was probably 5 or 6 years old.
Okay, yeah.
And so I just remember going in and I was like, okay. Now, in hindsight, to a 5-year-old, a 40-year-old is ancient, so they probably weren't actually that old.
True.
But that stayed with me in my mind. And so this gentleman, he allowed me to go shadow him, and I just had this feeling of, I think this is what's next for me.
I did have a chance to review some of your reviews online, and I'm sure you've read them as well. Specifically, a lot of them popped out on the reviews for me that were, she really took the time and education. So a lot of people come on and say education, but I don't know as though it's as thorough for someone to comment on a review. And that was threaded through your reviews of, hey, education, couldn't have done it without her. Someone looking for a house now, you're a buyer's expert is what I'd call it. Why you? You're down your main hub. Let's talk a little bit about area that you cover and what the advantage is to someone working with you.
I think the advantage is time, right? I think all of us wish, whether it's a realtor, an attorney, your physician, right? We have limited time. And a lot of people aren't willing to spend the time needed to make sure someone has all of their questions answered. And I get a lot of people that say, you're very busy. I am, but I'm never too busy for my clients. And it's probably to a fault. I actually went and calculated the average amount of time I spend with each of my clients, and it's over 15 hours.
I invested.
Yeah, I invest in every client. It is very important to me from day one. I sit down with my clients and I ask them, what are your questions, right? What concerns do you have going into this? And I also ask them to share with me what their experience is. Do they have any experience buying real estate? As I said, we do a lot of relocation. I have clients that are moving down from the Northeast. I know from participating in real estate sales up there, it's a completely different process. There is no due diligence fee, right? You have a 3-day attorney review period. Here, you have about 30 seconds to figure it out, and then you're signing off and we're moving forward. And to me, I think the education piece, it weighs a little bit more on me because this is the largest financial investment most people are ever going to make in their lives. And I want to make sure they're doing it with eyes wide open.
How do they react to you when you say, hey, I think you should probably rent this instead of selling? I'm assuming you get calls from past clients, hey, I'm ready to sell. And you say, well, wait a minute.
So my past clients, they don't have a panic attack because I actually preemptively set them up with that. So the first time we work together, even if they're first time home buyers, I let them know, hey, Brad, when you come to me in a few years, because I know they're never going to go with anyone else. When you come to me in a few years and you tell me you're ready to trade this house in and upgrade to the next one, I'm going to have a conversation with you and either your financial advisor and or your lender, and we're going to talk through whether or not that makes the most sense. Because you may need to turn this into an investment and maybe a smarter decision. So I start with that. If it's a seller coming to us for the first time, I sit down and I say, let's look at numbers, humor me, right? Let's just look at this and see what's the worst that could happen if we rented this instead of selling it, right? Why do you need to sell it? Sometimes it doesn't make sense, right? Sometimes there's a divorce involved, a relocation to another state, and they're like, okay, I really don't want to have a property that I'm managing across state lines. Sometimes financially it's not feasible. I just feel like I have a responsibility to present all of the opportunities available to a buyer and a seller at all times, and then be able to educate them on what those look like. And then it's their decision. And I'm never going to try and force them one way or the other. It needs to be their choice. I just want to know that I can go to sleep at night knowing they understand what those opportunities are and whether or not they're going to take advantage of them.
And I think it's cool you're calling it an opportunity. How many of them would you say, you're right, let's go rent this?
Percentage-wise,
yeah,
I would say probably about 70 to 75% of our clients we've turned into investors.
I think that establishes a lot of trust between you and the client. Like this, ultimately, it is where you get paid by selling your house. So you're saying, make this a rental. And I feel like that establishes trust over, like, let's see what actually makes sense for you versus you want to get rid of the house,
Exactly. And we do lead with that. And I tell them, look, financially, I serve to gain the most if you sell this house. I do not do property management. I will probably never do property management. And so I don't make anything if you decide to rent this.
I bet they find that very interesting that you don't want a commission. It's in your best interest. Let's talk about renting it. And you do not manage them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's no diamond skin on that in your game at all besides the well-being of the client's investment and how they captured the house.
I'm a firm believer, and I know it's a cliched saying that's overused, but I actually truly live it and believe it. I want to treat people as though I want to be treated. And I feel like whether it's in real estate or many of the other large-scale industries anymore, we just don't do that enough. The customer service is not what it used to be and what it should be. Tell me about the area. So your office is where? Where do you reside? Our office is physically in Dilworth. We are actually, since we've joined EXP, we won't need a full-scale office. They're cloud-based. So
I was going to ask the question, where's your car?
Yes,
because
exactly.
You're out and about, but you are down in Dilworth. So a big part of your sandbox is the Charlotte area.
Yes,
surrounding that.
We are currently in Dilworth. Lodestone was founded in Charlotte in 2012. I joined the team as an agent in 2017, and I purchased and took the team over in 2019. So we've been predominantly here our entire lives. I changed things when I took over. So I hire agents that live in a specific area of the city, and that's where they're allowed to sell. They need to be experts. They need to know the commercial development, the residential development, anything that's going on, school changes, etc. They need to be an expert in that neighborhood so that they can provide the best information possible to clients.
Talk a little bit about some of the different areas that you cover where you have people working with you.
So we have an agent up in Mooresville on the lake. We have one in South Park. Myself, I personally live in Dilworth, which is also why the office is there selfishly. I have agents in Monroe area, Matthews, Waxhaw, South Carolina. We're expanding out into the Gastonia, Belmont area, and then Concord and Harrisburg as well. And then we'll also be expanding into Atlanta this year. Wow,
so you really have an expert set up in the market. I think it's, back when we started, we would do a loan here at the lake and we would do it at the point, Trump's golf course out there. And before you get to the point, there's a couple neighborhoods like the Harbor, a couple different ones. The farms are in there as well. And to compare back in the point with something in the farms,
completely different.
Right. It wasn't accurately displayed on the appraisal. Obviously you have to have good appraisers that do it. But there's an advantage to knowing that intimate market within a 20-mile radius of where you're at.
And especially, right, I would have argued with myself even during the height of COVID, you didn't have to be an expert in anything. Right? I mean, let's be honest, it was insanity, and it's a market unlike anything I've ever seen and hopefully will ever see again. But now that we're out of that, it's really important. The market is changing week by week in some areas, and one neighborhood may be flying off the shelves the second anything hits, and the neighbor right next door is just sitting, and you need to know why. Be able to explain that to clients and explain to them why these aren't relevant. One of my favorite past clients, I love them to death, they relocated up to Maine. They had a house in Fairmeadows, a small pocket neighborhood in South Park, and he was running his own comps before I came to the meeting with Barclay Downs.
Okay.
And if you know those areas well, they could not be more different.
Like what I was just explaining with
exactly.
Similar to the lake.
And so he was overvaluing his house by almost $250,000. And
just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. And, and this was pre-COVID, so there's no way you're getting away with that kind of a gap. And I just said to him, listen, all due respect, I'm happy to take this listing on. I'm not going to list it at that price because you're wasting your time and mine. This is just not a good idea. You're going to accrue days on market. You're going to end up taking significantly less, and people aren't going to take you seriously. And I said to him, why don't we host a broker open? And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to test the market with the price. And let's see what feedback they come back with. And so I didn't put a price out there. I asked people to come back and give me a price for it. And almost every single one came back exactly where I told him.
Okay, and I'm assuming it was under the 250.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well below that.
Well
yes.
below that. All right,
And
but it helped. It's accuracy is better than fluff.
Exactly.
In any market. Well, tell me. So I'm a buyer now, and people would say, "Oh, there's two things you're going to hear in today's market. One, the rates stink. You heard that before?
Yeah, I've heard that.
Okay, a couple times. Rates are too high. I'm waiting for rates to come down. And I'm 30 years deep into this. 3% has been a window that I've seen for a very little time.
Yeah.
But waiting for them to come down is the first thing you're saying. And then there's no inventory, or it's very limited inventory. As a buyer now, I was on the phone. I want to get your take on this. I was on the phone with a guy who's looking for a house now in different scenarios. But to me, as a buyer, I think it's more strategy right now than it is waiting. You talk to any financial planner. You can't time the market, shouldn't time the market. And that's what I see a lot of people trying to do instead of strategize around the best options to be able to capture it. With my point, very good negotiation right now as a buyer and very little competition to have to compete. And the minute these rates start moving under that blessed 6 number, right? Get 5.99, the world changes and the competition increases. I remember taking a deal years ago, COVID times, when it was competitive in an on-fire market, 50,000 due diligence non-refundable.
Yeah.
Crazy numbers.
Yeah.
You don't have that now. If I'm a buyer now, what do you think of the market today?
I think it's a great market for buyers. I think it's the best one we've had since 2015.
Yeah, isn't that interesting as you sit back and you watch the market that you could say this is the best? Many people would probably disagree, buyers.
A lot of people disagree with me all the time. I just laugh. I'm like, hey, you can call me crazy, but you know what? So far, I've never been wrong betting on myself.
What do you say about when I bring up negotiate? I'm not on the street. I'm seeing applications and contracts come over, seller concessions, working the price, taking a couple of days to do it. Nobody's on fire to.
Right.
I took another one. They never called me back. You got none of that.
Exactly.
This is a strong time to buy.
It's a fantastic time, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The rates are high. Historically, they're still insanely low.
Agreed.
And so I remind people that if you look historically, anything sub 8% is low. We just, in this generation and in this recent times, we're used to these really insanely low rates. And I tell my clients, listen, 2.5%, 3.5%, it's never happening again in our lifetimes. If it does, we have either had another catastrophic occurrence like COVID, and we are headed to hell in a handbag.
Yeah.
So I don't actually want those rates back, even though, of course, I absolutely enjoyed those monthly payments on that house. But I had that rate. It's fantastic, right?
It's tough because you are, when you're in a market that is, like you had said, anybody could sell a house.
Yeah.
And it was like, I was on a webinar with several loan officers today, and it's like, I was telling them, order takers. You're sitting there just taking orders. Now is a time where you can have really good strategy around the loan, really good strategy around the offer. So from an investor standpoint, we had done an investment series on the show. You remember the stat that we had thrown out It had to do with buying in the beginning of the year. For most investors tend to lean that because there is a discount in the lower months.
Yeah, it's a better time to buy because more properties are sitting longer during those months. Is that what you mean? Or percentage statistic? I couldn't.
Well, I thought it was like 30% more of investors, and I don't know who the stat's a stat, but 30% of investors tend to lean more towards the slower months, which is January, February, and March, because of the ability to negotiate, and then you throw the rates on top of it. Yeah.
You've got a few different things, right? I mean, one, you've got negotiation. Sellers are anxious. To them, this is a slow market. If you look at the numbers statistically, this is still very much a seller's market, right? You look at the national...
You would say seller's market. Why? Define that a hair for me, because I'm going to lean on the buyer side. I'm negotiating heavier. I got a little more power with you. Yeah. You say sellers.
So statistically speaking, anything sub 6 months for supply is a buyer's market. And we haven't even crossed 3 months. We're not even close.
What would you call it when the buyer can negotiate so much more now? You agree with me. You were nodding your head. Right. They can. Yes. There is that negotiating. There is that power.
I call that strategic buying.
Okay. Same as I did.
Yes.
I love that. Same as I was saying. This is strategic. Right.
It is.
Have a strategy around not timing.
You're not competing against as many buyers, right? The second that there's a 5 in front, it's going to be a mass pandemic again, right? We're going to have a flood of people into the market because they're going to realize this is what we can do, right? You also have a confluence of things happening economically that are very different, right? So in Charlotte, we'll drill it down locally. You had a huge increase in property taxes. You had a huge increase in homeowners insurance. A lot of people have been in their homes 15, 20, 30 years. They're on fixed incomes. They can't afford that kind of a cost right at once, right? Let alone 2 of them. You also have people with a ton of equity tied up in their homes. Credit card debt is very high. I don't know about you, but I'd rather pay 6.5% to 7% than 19 to 20. And so you've got a lot of people refinancing down to try and erase that debt. Well, we got used to during COVID, you could do it over and over again because it took a matter of 2-3 weeks before a new record was hit, right? Yeah. Now it's not happening. And yet still we're averaging 9.6% appreciation. That's insane, right? Normal is 4 to 6. People have forgotten what normal truly is like, and they've gotten used to Charlotte's normal. And those are 2 different things. And so for that reason, one of the things I talk to my buyers about a lot is you cannot save your way, right? There are very few jobs in America that you can save your way above annual inflation and the appreciation of housing in Charlotte, right? Most of us are not getting more than 2.5-3% pay raise each year. So how are you going to magically have more money down as the housing is increasing? Even if we get a conservative year and it drops to 4%, you're still 1.5% behind, right? I'm
going to shift gears a little bit. I do agree with you. Tell me a little bit about someone looking for these rental properties and rates are higher. I don't cash flow.
It's a temporary thing.
Yeah,
right?
It's a Band-Aid thing. Yes. And that's how you would treat it as well. Yep. You know, we've had several of them that will talk to us about, I'm not cash flowing. I got off the phone with a guy buying a house VA, 0 down 2 unit, and wants to rent it out. He said, I'm not cash flowing. You're not putting any money down either.
Exactly, right? It didn't cost you anything. Another thing we talk about a lot of times, right, if you look at the population of first-time home buyers right now, many of their parents are dipping into their retirement accounts to help them pay for rent. We do a lot of education with those parents on why. Why are you going to take your retirement and basically light it on fire? You've worked hard for that. Your entire purpose of doing this is to benefit your kids. How about you benefit each other? Right? We're big proponents of finding the win-win for everybody.
Yeah, what does that look like for a parent who wants to help their kids?
So for a parent, your kid and your kid are moving back. You both want them to be in Charlotte. They want to be in Charlotte. Instead of getting a 2-bedroom apartment, take that retirement money, buy a property with it, right? Have your kids pay significantly below market value rent, so they're starting to save, they're getting ahead, but you're building equity and appreciation in the home at the same time. So now, fast forward a few years, you go and you can sell that house, or your kids can buy it out, right? You've got opportunities, you continue to use it as a rental. You have options that put that money back into your retirement rather than it just disappearing. Because most people at that age, they can't replace it.
What do you see missing in the market now when you're taking buyers out? And then I also want to kind of dovetail that on, Dilworth is one of the best, every time I'm on that with my wife. Oh, I love it down here. This is my favorite street. I don't even care what street we're on. If we're in Dilworth, that's one of her favorite streets. Beautiful, beautiful neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Each little pocket, we brought up Salisbury, we brought up Concord, we brought up Mooresville, we brought South Park down there. Do you see, meeting with your team, different strategies that need to be in place?
Absolutely.
Like what? That's kind of what I want to uncover in this month.
I'd say a lot of it depends on where they're coming from and what that current home is, and then also what the values are. So we just walked a house in Shelby the other week. This person has put a lot of money into the home and done a great job rehabbing the inside. It still needs a lot of work, and they're running out of funds. It's on a massive oversized lot, so we were like, well, rather than selling the house and to get something newer, you're basically paying the same amount and you're not getting anything really that much nicer at that price point.
Right.
Why don't we subdivide your lot and sell off your lot?
Now you're talking. So,
right.
So step into that a little bit, because you're not a normal realtor after talking. Okay. I thought
I'm starting to take it as a compliment.
I'll get that out there. I'd like to list my house. Hold on, I think I can make you more money. I think that's very unique. Very unique.
That's awesome. I knew you were going to like that a lot.
It's just about right. It's exploring opportunities and educating people. And again, ultimately, the choice is theirs. And there's plenty of people that look at me and say, I don't want to be a landlord. I don't want to do this,
Yeah.
But if they don't know it exists, how are they supposed to make that decision? And I'm fortunate. I grew up with parents who ran their own business, and they did flips. They did vacation properties. They did long-term rentals. I had the opportunity to learn from watching them, and I saw what it did to build the wealth for my own family. And even my husband and I, we're on our third property in Charlotte. We've only been here, we just hit 9 years in November.
See, son, I'm not that weird for moving every 2 years while you were growing up. See?
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's normal when you're different.
Full disclosure, we are in Dilworth now because my husband basically gave me a pseudo ultimatum. If you know my husband, he doesn't do ultimatums. He's an easygoing Midwesterner. I picked a great one. But after 2 of my projects, he said, okay, I need you to pick a place that you will stay in for 8 to 10 years. And I said, how about 5 to 6? And he goes, 8 to 10. I said, well, 5 to 8. I shift those years every time we have a conversation. However, for me, I was like, okay, if you're going to get me to settle down, I need a big project. So we have a 1905 bungalow we're fixing up. And I said, I have to be walkable because I am in my car all day. So when I'm done, I want to come home, park the car, and just be able to go.
Awesome.
So that's how we ended up there. But, we bought the cheapest house. Our first property was over in Sherwood Forest. We bought the cheapest house in the neighborhood. We were in line to go in and see it, and people walked in, spent about 30 seconds, and turned and walked out. And he looked at me like, okay. I said, it's an opportunity. Just stick with it. We're going to get in there soon, and let's go in. They've been chain smokers. I mean, we could barely breathe after 5 minutes in the house, but I knew the bones were good. And so I convinced him to go on this journey with me, and we spent 2 years doing a lot of work in it. And I'm also very fortunate. I tell people my dad comes down and does a lot of the work with us. Yeah. So that definitely helps on our cost. But we did a lot of that work, and then we turned around and we sold it for a massive profit, way more than I could have ever expected. You
have a unique ability through the way you grew up. It's similar to how we did so many properties.
Yeah.
You'd walk in we used to call them POS,
Yep.
Junk. It's just junk.
Yes.
And you'd walk in. The first rehab that I purchased from my dad, and it was full of cockroaches.
Yeah.
The basement was full of trash, and he saw, this is a good one. This is not a good one, Dad. Yeah, it's a good one. Like opportunities. Like that sounds kind of crazy. Yeah. But by the time we were done, we had made money, was able to move to my next one through making 10, 20 grand off it way back 30 years ago.
Yeah.
When you ran up to this client that you talked about, hey, we should subdivide, where's that come from?
I've developed this ability to just take a step back and kind of block out what the market is saying, what the people are saying is the way you're supposed to do it. And I've just like to look at things and say, okay, let me go through and think creatively, what can we do to find a win for this client? And so it's always about just figuring out where does that line get drawn of this still gets them the end goal of what they want without sacrificing too much, right? If that client had told me I cannot live without having an acre of land, that's not something I'm probably going to suggest. But one of the things that they shared with us was, moving forward for the next place, I don't want as much land, right? It's a lot of maintenance. I'm getting older. Okay, so this isn't important to you, right? So let me go ahead and what if we do this? And let's just test it, right? And that's what I tell a lot of my clients. Look, I don't have a guarantee that this is going to be the right location for a builder right now. The only guarantee I have is I'm going to go try really hard to make this happen.
Yeah. Well, most people may not even know that they have the option to cut that piece off.
Yeah.
And how to do that. Well, I had a client call in, Alex had called in today. They purchased a property. He's up in Raleigh, I believe.
Yeah.
They purchased a property and he's looking to refinance it from the time he purchased. And he says, it came with 2 parcels. Mm-hmm. Well, we leaned the whole property the first time. And when we go to refinance it, we'll be just leaning it because his equity has grown. Yeah. We're able to take moves similar like that. Very impactful for a client's profit.
It is. And it's that creativity, that thinking outside the box. I think it's really a lot of what's missing in the real estate classes, right? They're teaching you how to stay out of quote unquote real estate jail, which is important. And it's also a matter of doing some more real life scenarios of, here's a property. How do you look at it? How do you approach this, right? I always tell my clients, I'll give you the number of beds and bathrooms and square footage on a house, right? But we all know you can go on Zillow or Realtor.com or whatever, the 18,000 apps available now, and find that yourself. That's not my value, right? My value is going to come in, walking inside that home with you and telling you, this is in great shape, or this is lipstick on a pig and we should run, and here's why. It's in being able to give them a sense of, okay, so historically, this is how much this neighborhood is appreciated, right? This is what you can safely anticipate moving forward. I do that a lot of times. I'll have clients, they'll get down to 2 properties. They're very similar. They're different neighborhoods. And I will go through them and say, okay, here's the historical data on these 2 neighborhoods. You make an educated decision, right? Which one makes the most sense for you?
Do you have a lot of buyers when they're going to investment property? What approach do they take on financing, or what do you advise with the current house they have, and they might have a lot of equity? That's a lot of moving parts, and I know each one's different. What are some, I guess I'd call them, characteristics you're looking at to make it happen?
I'd say we've utilized a lot of HELOCs.
Yeah.
That's been kind of the biggest tool we've pulled in recent years, especially post-COVID. As you guys know, the value in the homes is insane. Yeah. And so we're able to access a lot of equity and use that to tap in and get that down payment out that historically people couldn't access without selling the home. So we'll use HELOCs a lot. We're using some bridge loans to be able to sway things until they can make things work because they know they've got a bonus coming or inheritance or something is coming up, some life moment that they know we can swing this, but it's going to be 2 or 3 months down the road. That's okay.
Have you done much with DSCR loans?
I have done a lot with DSCR. We don't use them as much recently. I would say about 3 years ago, those were pretty hot and heavy. More so, we're getting a lot of people that are just not comfortable because the interest rates are so high. It's a conversation we try and have, even with a traditional mortgage. We just tell people, don't look at the rate, right? Look at the monthly payment. You have to be comfortable with that number first and foremost. If you are, then we're going to look at how much cash you have to bring to close. And if either of those is uncomfortable, then we're going to adjust things until they are. Spend
a few minutes, because we've been doing a lot of DSCR over the last couple of years. And spend a couple minutes what you're seeing clients. I think of Ronnie as a client who's on his 4th property, and he's been all DSCR.
I think it's a lot of short term is where they see a lot of cash flow.
Yes.
Long term makes me a little nervous because of the 1 ratio. Meaning if you're over 1, you get a much better rate with prepayment penalty. If you're under that, it can be 8.5 to 9. So with him, he's like, he closed that first property that he bought was at 10.5.
Yeah.
with a 1-year prepayment penalty, and he came back to us and said, I've made, I think it was about $100,000 for the year. So
in cash flow.
Yeah.
Wow,
exactly.
significant.
Yeah.
Even with the crappy rate.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
gave that to him?
Yeah,
I think Dad wants that property back.
I checked it and I was like, really? Like, okay, let's, like, I mean, if that's what you think is a good investment, let's do it. So, and he moved forward with it. I didn't like the rate personally. I don't think he did either. Nobody likes 10.5, right? But
No.
at the same time, he was cash flowing heavy on it monthly. So even in the off seasons and things like that.
Now,
I think you just have to find the right opportunities, and they're
Yeah.
just not as easily attainable as they were a few years ago.
I think a lot of, and I don't have a ton of experience, like all my rentals, all of them were long-term. They were all long-term, and the short-term rental is a newer game. I don't know how many years ago, but it wasn't the norm when I was buying houses. This particular guy, where was his property at?
North Topsail. And he's actually under contract on another one on the beach.
So-
similar
So
property.
that's a really high rental market.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, so what's interesting is he comes in and captures the property at 10.5. You brought him back forward. How long ago to refinance?
One year later, we used
Because-
12 month Airbnb statements to a 7.5.
Yeah.
So
That's fantastic.
That was the
100%
big
off.
win with him, and I think the key with that was him knowing that would cash flow. Even at the 10.5, he was making good money.
yeah, and he owned like I think 2 rentals before that. He sold both of those. They were both short term rentals, but those were cash flowing great in Winston Salem out of anywhere. So I think he took it to North Topsail, which I would imagine does even better, right?
Yeah.
Rental realtor, what house? Where do I go buy a rental? Where would you go?
Off market.
Off market. So houses before they're even coming up is a big advantage to be able to call
absolutely.
you. Yeah, see, most would not know that.
Yeah.
They'd be looking on it and then it'd be gone and they would miss it.
Exactly.
How do
you
they
have to be able to move quickly.
And how does off market work for people listening?
So EXP actually has its own program. It's another reason why we went to the brokerage. It's called ZenList, and it's a publicly accessible, I'm going to use that term loosely, platform. However, you have to have a signed agency agreement in order to access it as my client. All of the EXP listings, we are able to post those out to the entire company before they even go on the MLS. So you have access
a good
to
lead
stuff.
time.
Exactly.
Very good lead time. How long do they have in that kind of?
It's completely up to you and the client.
Wow.
So
Okay.
typically with us, for our listings, we will tell the clients, depending on the time of the year, here's kind of, we had some clients, they weren't going to be moving out for a few months yet. We were like, ideally, we want to get this painted, prepped, etc. There's some stuff we want to do before we list this. We'll go ahead and list it off market with the prior photos first. If it sells and you get an offer you want, fantastic. We'll go ahead and move forward and we'll negotiate your lease back and everything else in it. And if not, then we'll go ahead and go to market. But at least you're not accruing days on market. And so it
That's
gives
huge.
you that opportunity to get out there. And it also allows us to test the market too. In some of those neighborhoods where it's like, we don't have as much sales data, there's not a lot of turnover, we can go out and test it and see. And if nobody responds, we know we've overpriced it and it's time to bring it back down.
Is listing a house hard right now?
I don't think so. I've never thought it was difficult though. There's so many technology tools out there that make it very easy. I mean, we can create a custom property website in 5-10 minutes. You have your vendors for photography, measurements, 3D Matterports. It's so much easier now to give more eyes access to a property than it used to be, even pre-COVID. Matterports weren't really a thing here in Charlotte. They hadn't taken off other than some of the massive apartment complexes. And so relocation traffic, you had to fly them in, or best case scenario, we went and did a FaceTime tour, but back then no one was really that comfortable pulling the trigger with a FaceTime tour, right? COVID changed a lot of that.
Yeah.
But so now there's a lot of different ways to access it that are more realistic. So it makes it a lot easier for us. I'm a big nerd when it comes to organization and statistics and processes. And so we have everything down to a T. So to me, a listing is, we're just going through a checklist and we're saying this is what needs to be done to ensure that you reach the most people in the best way possible.
Is there a bad time to list, or is it better to wait? And I'm talking today's market. I'm not talking yesterday, year or 2 years ago, but like, hey, should we wait till spring? Would you get it out there now? What's the feel if I'm looking to sell?
I don't really ever give a generalized answer to that because I feel like it truly depends on the individual situation, right? if you are about to start missing some payments, we're getting your house on the market now.
Yeah.
Right? We're not going to risk you going into foreclosure and ruining your credit. If you've got all the time in the world, we're going to pull the stats for your neighborhood for the past 3 to 5 years, depending on the situation, and say, okay, historically, this is where your neighborhood has the least amount of competition and the best offer to list price.
I think the big key if you are going to sell your house and they don't invite you in for an interview to talk to you, they'd be making a big mistake. Because I could go on and say, what is it? I've been doing 30 years and I've met thousands and thousands of realtors, and you are handling your business above a lot of the competition.
Thank you.
And it's interesting to say it that way, because one of the main things that I would say you're doing is hearing them. And that is a lost art. And I think that was the comment that I had made when we're taking orders. Well, not anymore. You're actually listening to be able to come up with that strategy for a client to be able to manage the payment, not buy the $500,000 price, manage the payment in this kind of market with a good strategy. And it sounds like you're the right one to help them with it.
I appreciate that. We work really hard to make sure that we're supporting our clients, whatever their needs are. And it is very unique, and it's going to shift depending on their life situation. I share with everybody, we went through a big change personally 18 months ago. I was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition, and it rocked my world, and it was great in the end. And I tell people, and they think I'm crazy again when I say this, but it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Would I love to not have this? Absolutely. At the same time, though, it gave me a lot of perspective, and it really forced me to get serious about how I was handling the business, what I was doing with it, and it became less about growth for growth's sake and more about growing intentionally and making sure any decisions that I make about the business on a daily basis is with our clients in mind, and it's how do we best serve them. And so we're not going to add some new technology if it doesn't make a difference for the clients, right? Or if it doesn't allow us to do a better job for them, we're not going to add it just because it's the latest technology. I tell people, you will not see me on social media that much, right? It is probably my biggest flaw. Most people like to point out, I personally don't think it's a flaw. I value my private life. And I like that my private and my professional lives are two different things. That being said, I certainly overflow the two quite a bit. My husband will definitely back me up on that one. But to me, I think social media, it is a very good way to get market listings out, right? That's helpful. But as far as realtors marketing themselves that way, I think it allows for a lot of people that don't actually know what they're doing to get out in front of mass audiences. I think it's the same thing with TikTok. You have so-called experts that don't actually have a degree in what they're talking about. Right. They don't have any scientific data to back it up. And, this is not a wholesale statement. I have many good friends in this industry who are phenomenal realtors, and they've built their business on social media, and they've done a great job with it. I just think the assumption that you have to be there, you have to be present 24/7, I don't think it's a wise one. And getting sick kind of taught me that, I worked 7 days a week, pretty much 24/7 for the first 6 years of my career. And it wasn't until that happened that I said, you know what, I'm going to start taking 1 day off a week. And that was a really big thing for me to do. It's allowed me, though, to take better care of myself, of my health, my well-being, and I'm able to be there for my clients. I'm not sick as much, and that's huge. That makes a difference.
Better is good for them.
Exactly. I think it's a chronic thing with parents, right? You put yourselves last. The kids always come first, but you've got to make space for yourself. Otherwise, it comes at a detriment to them down the road.
You can cut that. Phenomenal, John.